So, it was the summer of 2010. I had just spent 6 weeks backpacking around Guatemala, living and working alongside the locals. And one thing that stood out for me from that time were the stories they told me about the years leading up to what would become the genocide and the 36-year civil war. Before that, how the police were so militarized. That was something that really challenged, that thought challenged my, at the time, moderately conservative and privileged worldview. And so that was on my mind as I came back to Toronto. A few days later, I heard there was this thing happening called the G20 Summit. I didn't know what a G20 was, and I certainly didn't know much about economic policy. But I heard that on the news that there was hundreds of police coming to town, and they were getting suited up in riot gear, and they were randomly arresting people in the streets. So I was concerned about that, and so when I heard that there was a protest happening that weekend, I decided to go. So on the Saturday afternoon of the G20, I met up with a friend at Queen's Park. I wrote on my arm, "Is this freedom?" And I joined the peaceful march down University Ave in Queen West. And the spirit was really one of a parade. It was celebratory and joyful. And then I got a call from my girlfriend. She had been working at the Eden Center. And she said, some windows got smashed on Yonge Street. Our store's on lockdown. Can you come meet me? So I left the protest, met up with her, and we went back to her home on the east end of downtown. I was planning to walk home that night, back to my home on the west end, but then I saw on the news that the cops were making all these mass arrests at Queen's Park. So I was like, I'm not going to go anywhere near that tonight. I'm just going to lay low, stay home. Tomorrow night I'll walk back home across downtown. So it's now Sunday morning. I get up. I head out around 10 a.m., start walking across town. And my plans for that day, actually, I wasn't going to go to any more protests. It was just too dangerous. I was actually going to go to a church picnic in North York. I was religious at the time, and my friends were expecting me up in North York at this church picnic. So I'm just walking up Yonge Street. It's pretty empty, and I'm like the only one walking near Yonge and Gerrard. And then I see like 15 police officers on bikes come out of an intersection. And they see me, and they pause, and one of them says, "This guy, let's get him." And I'm like, I'm just walking, like I'm not doing anything. But I keep walking, and as I get to the intersection moments later, I'm swarmed by 15 officers. They say, "You're under arrest." They throw my hands behind my back. They handcuff me in zip ties. They take off my hat and my sunglasses and my bag, and I'm just a guy going home to go to church, and they're like, "Nah, you're a vandal. You're a terrorist. No church for you today, buddy." And so they push me around. They lead me up this dead-end street where there's another 20 cops coming to this hotel. Apparently the hotel was where all the cops were staying, and I'm right in front of it. And so now there's me and 40 cops and no one else around, and they start yelling and cheering at my arrest. And they're hurling insults at me like, "Fuck you, faggot," and "Whose streets? Our streets," mocking the protest chant. And then they push me into a wall. And they start going through all my stuff, my cell phone and my wallet, trying to find something to justify my arrest. I just play cool. I cooperate. I'm I'm just going to be cooperative and answer the questions. In a few minutes, they'll realize they've made a mistake and they'll let me go, right? That wasn't the case. They told me that I was under arrest, that I'd been charged for disguise with intent, for wearing a bandana around my neck. So I wait a couple hours, and finally a truck comes, and I get thrown in the back of this truck. It's dark, it's hard to breathe, and we drive a couple blocks, we stop, and then I hear some scuffle outside the truck, and someone else comes in, handcuffed, bleeding from the face. This goes on and on. We go a couple blocks, pick up someone else, couple blocks, someone else, until the truck's filling up, and it's getting really hard to breathe in there. A couple hours later, finally, 4 hours after my arrest, we arrive at the Eastern Avenue Detention Center. I'm let out of the truck, and I'm into this big warehouse-like room. There's rows and rows of cages, all these makeshift cells, bright lights, chaos, so many people, so many loud noises, and just a mood of anger and disorganization. I'm led into my cage. It's about 10 feet wide by 15 feet long. In one corner, there's a small bench. In the other corner, there's an orange porta potty without a door, and surveillance cameras all around. And in this cage, there's another 30 guys. Most of them were protesters from Quebec, students who had come to town for the G20, and they had been woken up that morning at gunpoint, arrested while sleeping at U of T. So these were my comrades, and there really was a spirit of camaraderie. I was grateful for one of the first times in my life, grateful for the fact that I had done 12 years of French immersion, so I could actually, I could be in on the joke because we were making fun of the cops and like giving each other tips on how to deal with the police and stuff like that. And we're begging the police, like, can we make a phone call? Can I talk to a lawyer? Can I get some food, some water, anything? After 6 hours after my arrest, finally they come around with water. So we all get like a cup, a small styrofoam cup of water. We have a drink. And then there's these 30 styrofoam cups sitting on the floor of the cage. And one burning question on everyone's mind: why? Like, why the hell are we in here? This is ridiculous. Why? And so myself and another guy in the cage, we pick up all the styrofoam cups, and one at a time, and we're still handcuffed, right? We put them one at a time. We stick these styrofoam cups into the holes of the cage, and we spell out the word "why" in plain sight of the cameras. It didn't actually change anything in that moment. No one came and let us out. And over, as the hours wore on and it became night, I started getting concerned, like, maybe I'm not actually going to get out of here today. It's been hours. I disappeared off the street. My family probably doesn't know where I am. People are probably wondering why I didn't show up at the church picnic in North York. And we're just, it's turning into a mood of despair. You feel it's so dehumanizing. One of the lowest points of the night was when I actually had to use the bathroom and the porta potty. Thankfully, some of the guys were nice enough to form a human wall in front, so I had a bit of privacy. But then there's the situation of being handcuffed, and there's no toilet paper, and so the best you can do is wipe your ass with a bit of a styrofoam cup. And this was my reality for a night. It was cold, laying there in just my shorts and t-shirt on the concrete floor. And I was just so upset, but I forced myself to stay awake because I didn't want to fall asleep because those cops didn't know what cell anyone was in. They'd come around with a clipboard and be like, is so-and-so in here? And so I didn't want to miss my chance if they finally came. Finally, after almost 24 hours since my arrest, it's the following morning, I hear, "Wall." I'm like, yeah, that's me. And so I get let out. I get interrogated and strip searched. And they're like, "Oh, we can't find anything on you. We don't know, frankly, why you're arrested, but it must have been for some good reason, so we have to keep you in here longer." So the hours go on. Finally, I managed to convince one of the cops to let me use a payphone and call my family. I tell them where I am, and they're just relieved to hear that I'm alive. They've been up all night calling every hospital in the city, saying, have you heard of this guy? Do you know where he is? And there was nothing. So they were relieved to hear that I was alive. But I'm still back in my cage now. The hours go on and on. At this point, it's Monday afternoon, and it's starting to get quite empty in the detention center. Like I'm one of the last people left in here, it seems. Finally, after 28 hours, they say, "All right, you're going to sign your release papers. We're going to drop your charges. You're going to be free to go." Great. So I get my stuff back. I walk out of the detention center. It's a sunny afternoon. I cross the street and I'm met by a whole bunch of people, all strangers. They've got food, water, hugs, and humanity. One of them offers me a ride downtown. I accept, get a ride back home. And as I'm showering and washing myself clean from that disgusting experience, I realize there's dried blood in the back of my head, and I realize that the day before when the cops pushed me into the wall, it actually cut my head. And that night I couldn't sleep. I was just thinking, the cops could barge in the door any second and take me away again. It happened yesterday, it could happen again. That fear and that anxiety lasted for months. I'd just be walking down the street, minding my own business, going to work, and I'd see a cop car, and my heart would start racing, and I'd get anxious. And after a while of this, I was like, I can't do this. So, thankfully I've lived a fairly privileged life, so I really have no roadmap for dealing with trauma and dealing with this kind of injustice. So I sought out a counselor, and they helped me work through that trauma. And part of that was taking the negative experiences and turning that into something positive. So I decided to pursue justice in my own way. I sued the police. Thank you. I sued the police for $25,000. We settled that out of court. It was one of the first lawsuits to settle from the G20, and others have followed since. In addition to that, I'd filed a complaint against the police for what happened to me for my unlawful arrest and detention. And as a result of that, after years of jumping through legal hoops, the cop who arrested me, Constable Vincent Wong, has been found guilty of misconduct, and he's now facing potential suspension.
Good.
I know it might not sound like a lot, but that's actually quite rare that happens with the police. One other thing that came out of that, my complaint triggered this investigation that revealed that Constable Wong arrested me because he was following orders to arrest anyone wearing a bandana. And so we've been working the last few years, myself and my lawyers, to try to get to the bottom of that. Who gave those orders? Why did they give those orders? And we feel that after 4 years of this legal work, we're finally getting close to some kind of answer. So we know that the order to arrest anyone wearing a bandana was all just part of the police's strategy to intimidate protesters and to silence voices of dissent. They wanted to discourage activists. Instead, they turned me into one.